we're going to be sharing an overview of what's in our campaigner survey report this year. Please do stick your questions in the chat. We'll leave time for a bit of a discussion at the end as well. You will, of course, all get the link as well to download the report so you can have your own copy. And one of the things you might notice, we'll also share the slides and they'll be recording as you go through. And I'll point out when we get to it, but there's a little tree in the bottom of some of the slides that tells you which page on the report I'm talking about. So if there's something that particularly you think, oh, I'd love to do something with that information, that will help you kind of find your way back in the report. There's also a slide deck with all the numbers in. So again, we want to make this as user-friendly as possible. You can take the numbers, you can make your own graph, you can use it in the way that you want. As I say, this is for you. We're here to give you some evidence, give you some insight. As far as we know, this is the only annual survey that takes your voices. So when you look at the report, you'll see loads of quotes, but you'll also see lots of data. And our hope is that through this, you can use it in your fundraising reports, you can use it to influence internally, you can learn something about the trends and the tactics, so for your planning and your campaign strategizing. And if there's anything as well that in the report that you think, I'd love to know a bit more about that, there's way more information that we have that we didn't put in there because we only had a few pages. So do have that dialogue with us. We'd love to hear more from you. My name's Katie, for those of you who don't know me. I was almost going to say I'm the interim CEO. I'm not anymore. I'm the actual CEO of SMK, the Sheila McKechnie Foundation, and I've been here just over a year. I'm going to get straight into the slides just so that we make the most of our time. So those of you who don't know, I'm sure most of you have come across SMK before, but I'm not Sheila. This is Sheila, legendary campaigner, and this organisation was set up for campaigners in her memory. Although it says foundation, we don't have any money to give away, which is a little bit sad, but we are absolutely here for the campaigns community, and this is how we support you. We want to connect you, and ECF does a great job as well at sharing information and resources, keeping us at the forefront. We want to support you in terms of our training, making sure that either through a consultancy you have the most up-to-date tactics and best practice and information, whether you're an early stage campaigner or whether you're long in the tooth and have been around for decades. We want to help you make your campaigning more effective. But we also want to champion campaigners. We think that you are awesome. We are awesome. And actually, without us, a healthy civil society does not work. And one of the ways we do that every year is our SMK National Campaigner Awards, a brief advert for which we'll follow right at the end because they're almost upon us. So that's us, if you didn't know us before. And the survey itself comes from people like you. I'm sure there are people on the call that completed the survey. Thank you so much for spending the time to do that. We had 166, which is our second highest response rate, which is really pleasing. But also we've got 10 years of data for the first time. So we were really working on trying to make sure that trend line is happening. Can I just check? Have you pressed record, Dwayne? I haven't had the little...
Yes, I pressed record.
Okay, it hasn't popped up. Yep. All right, no worries. I'll keep going. So the donut on your screen now just gives an idea of the diversity of voices. So it's not just one part of the campaigns community. We've got housing and homelessness there, disability, women and girls, racial justice, a whole host of different issues that you are working on. And so these trends, while they might be more acute in some areas, are across the board. There is a bit of a bias in terms of where the data was coming from in terms of location. So 92% of people that responded are in England. Small representation from the nations, but some in there. 74% were in paid roles and 79% from registered charities. So there are some people working freelance in there, but the majority are in the charity sector. We also asked the people that filled in the survey what kind of campaigning you're involved in. 75% they were involved in changing behaviour and attitudes, 55% changing public services, 92% a change in the law. Now, The mathematicians among you might realize that doesn't add up. And that's because 81% of you are doing more than one of those things at any one time. And although we've sort of chunked those out a little bit into three areas, we understand the interdependency and the scope of what we're trying to do to make permanent and transformative social change. So I'm going to talk you through different chunks of the results. You've heard a little bit more about who was involved. We're going to start in quite a gloomy place, but a really realistic view of how things are for campaigners. We're going to then look at a little bit about what's keeping us going and how we can find hope and strength from each other. And then we're also going to look at some of the trends around practice and what we might learn for the year ahead. So, first graph of many. This might not surprise you, but here's some of our 10-year data. And what it shows is that last year was the hardest year yet. If you look in 2016, 2017, just under half of you said that the year before had been a really hard year for campaigning. It had been worse than the year before. But if we zoom forward to the end of 2025, that's well over 2/3, 69% said it was getting worse. There is a small group of people, 14%, that said it was getting better. But that trend line is really important to understand, that not just is it tough, but actually some of those things that we're battling with and wrestling with are getting more extreme. So what's getting worse? Well, these are the kind of key highlights. Highlights, is that the right word? These are some of the key themes out of those responses. So certainly the polarized public political environment, certainly the hostile legislative environment. I'll put my teeth in a minute. The new government. It should be sort of pointed out as well. There's a real difference, though, depending on whether your agenda happens to align with the current Labour government or not there. Some people are definitely finding some good things in that space, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Public engagement is a challenge, and of course, the resource deficit. And here's just a few quotes from you in terms of how you're describing that situation. So we heard that mass far-right demonstrations, clickbait, social media, and growing apathy for conventional government makes it difficult to campaign for nuanced issue. And linked to that, one of our respondents says it's feeling increasingly hard to cut through when campaigning messages, things you think will shock and inspire action, don't seem to work anymore, as everything seems to be in a crisis. There's one more. The political environmental landscape makes policy change harder, increasingly difficult, with Labour leaning to the right and away from progressive alternatives to counter the far right. And there's one here about the internal context as well. So boards and CEOs are too worried about their income to actually go out and advocate for change. So I can see those of you with your cameras on, a few nods there. There's some resonance there. But there are some trends in this data that are a little bit new and a little bit different. So I just wanted to pull three out, and you can see on this slide the little tree in the bottom left here that says it relates to page 11 and 13. So on the far left, we've got this stat. 21% of people think that the biggest threat to campaigning is that there's not enough belief that social change is actually possible. And we know that so much of our grit and determination that keeps us going is that hope, is that desire, is that belief in change. So this really pours cold water on some of that motivation. Now, we don't have the sort of next level of data to say, well, is that really a personal view, or is that what more reflective of what people are saying? But this is really worrying in terms of helping campaigners feel that change is actually possible. And then in the middle, we've got a little pie chart about safety in campaigning. And as I said, this covers the whole range of issues, not just the migrant sector, or not just the racial justice sector, where we might see perhaps a little bit more in terms of the safety issues. But we've got 34% who said that yes, sometimes they worry about their personal safety, and 9% saying yes, frequently. And that's both online, but also offline as well. And that's really concerning, because most of us are just going to work to do our jobs, and we need to be able to do that in safety. And then the last one is around how supported you feel. And there is the great thing to say at those top two bars, a lot of you are getting a huge amount of support from the organisations you're in. But around 20 to 25% either feel very unsupported or somewhat unsupported in their jobs. So, as a community, we need to think about that in terms of how best we can look after each other, both in terms of increasing capacity or increasing skills within organisations, but as a wider community as well. So, those were things that were particularly stark around some of the threats to campaigning. And then the last one I want to sort of share in this space of threats is around having your voice heard. So that real influencing space. So just to explain this chart a little bit. So the orange are people that said it's easier to have our voice heard in this space. The sort of yellowy is there's no change compared to the previous year, and the red is harder. So there's a lot of lines there where the harder is definitely more substantial than the easier, with a particular focus on areas like social media, right at the bottom, 93 people said it was getting harder there. Also with national politicians, although we've also got one of the biggest swings of getting it easier. So as I said, that agenda is really important. And then national media is the other one that stands out with 71 people saying it's getting harder in national media. One thing I'd really love to highlight is something really positive on that bottom line. The one that's getting most easiest, or most people said this is getting easier, is having your voice heard with other campaigning organisations. And I think that's really incredibly important. We know there are so many big justice intersectional issues where one of us working in isolation is not going to make that change happen. So the fact that it's easier to speak to each other, to have our voices heard, or at least it's easier for some, is a trend that I hope continues and is really encouraging to see here in this one. So we're going to move out of the gloom onto the keeping going bit, keeping on, keeping on. So despite that backdrop, despite that scenario, we asked people whether you believe campaigning is still legitimate. And this we've been asking for 10 years as well, and whether you think there'll be a need for it. And there's a huge defiance in these two oranges, or these two pie charts in terms of yes, the need for campaigning is there. We're going to keep on campaigning. And that's a great testimony to the defiance and grit of the sector, I think, in terms of responding to the urgency of our context. So how are people doing that? Oh, nice bit of love coming up, Jane. Thanks for that. So there's a whole range of things. And one of the lovely things about the data in this survey is people told us what keeps them going. And some of the in-person events, we've been walking around with those printed out in a little bag of hope and sharing them with each other, as a just something to put in your pocket and walk away with. But here's a few things. Having strong relationships as a team, but being honest about those challenges, remembering the why, finding solace in coalition spaces with other campaigners, and getting hope and energy from that, reminding people of the journey, reminding people of the time it takes. So across those 166 responses, and there were some quite creative responses, the main themes were about investing in relationships, staying focused on your root cause, your North Star, the reason you do what you do, that connection and collaboration piece, actively choosing to seek hope and joy in the things that you do, whether it be small things or big things, and then the people that you work and connect with, making sure also that you're connecting with those affected by the issue. So you're really grounded in the reason that you're doing the work that you're doing. So in terms of the trends about what's working, um, these are kind of the big themes. So from those people that said things were better, um, here's that piece about the new government being more receptive to engagement, some new MPs, the keen, fresh ones, being more willing to be engaged with potentially. That point about collaboration across the sector, the motivation. So that kind of flip side of the threat and the urgency is a sort of swelling for some around motivation and a willingness for people to get on board and get behind things. And then despite it being harder, that diversity for greater public engagement is there as well. So just a few direct quotes from some of you just to bring that to life a little bit. You said that Labour government, despite huge constraints, has moved on areas the previous government was entrenched on. You said that civil society, civil service and politicians are proactively engaging with the sector. You said there have been some meaningful policy conversations. So if any of you are policy experts, that's a brilliant thing to know that those conversations have been meaningful and useful. And then a comment on the release of the Civil Society Covenant as a reason to be optimistic. And anecdotally, we have much more communication with officials and parliamentarians. And we know that's not the experience for everyone, but it is happening. And this is really important for us to think about. So, again, in spite of that backdrop, 55% of you said that you'd had a campaigning success in the last 12 months. So that's in that 2025 period. And we didn't just ask about whether you'd had a win or a little bit of a success. We asked if you'd had a breakthrough moment that you felt made a difference. So we're talking about a meaningful shift, something in a sticky situation that had moved forward. And the majority of us had. Obviously, not all of us had, but change is possible. And I think when we look at that 21% of us really worried that change doesn't feel possible anymore, it's good to come back to this. It's good to remember this. And you'll see in the awards as it comes up, there's been some amazing wins and some amazing stories of how campaigners are working together. So in terms of what's contributing to those successes, so when we sort of drilled down and we asked people, why do you think that happened? What's going on here? Again, the main themes for us were, so we've got number one on that slide, community or grassroots perspectives and voices cut through. So this is something that we've been working on as a sector for a number of years, sometimes getting it wrong, sometimes getting it right, picking ourselves up, learning and improving the way that we work with people with lived experience. But that is a key thing to those successes. And so there's an encouragement here to keep persevering for those of us who are doing it well, to lean into that conversation and help others to improve their practice too. Working with others to leverage different strengths. And I think this is really key. We're not just collaborating for the sake of it. Although that visibility and that numbers game is really important, particularly where we have marches like the Together Alliance. Um, but understanding what our different contribution is, making sure that we don't get so tangled in duplication or stepping on each other's toes, really coming to the table with a strong offer in terms of what we can bring and following through on that collaboration is making a real difference. That grit comes in at number three, repetition, persistence, tenacity, the characteristics that we have in spades. But we need to replenish ourselves to make sure we can keep coming at it and that approach. And then number four is about that long-term view. So despite the fact that, if most of us are in organizations, we're in quite short-term cycles in terms of budget, performance, some of the KPIs we might be reporting on, knowing that we're in it for the long haul, knowing that things take time, building relationships with that in mind, building social capital, building social networks, that mobilization piece is what's making our wins successful. And as I said, there's more in the report, and there's some specific kind of highlights, one around collaboration, one around hope, for example, one around responding to the far right. So there's sort of deeper dives in the report there about some of those things that are working. So the last two slides that I'm going to just show you before we have a chance to ask questions and discuss some of these and think between ourselves a little bit are around trends on tactics. So I've got two more graphs and they're going to use the same color scheme again. So red here is less focus on. The sort of sludgy yellow color is no change in focus. We're doing what we did last time. And then the orange is more focus on. So one of the things that you'll notice on both of these slides is that it doesn't add up. So you'd have thought if 74 of you were doing more focus on UK central government, then maybe there'd be a pullback in focus in other areas. Now, it might be that they just didn't work there before. But what this kind of implies to us is that partly it's about the threat of the environment, the need for response. We feel like we ought to do more, but it could be that we're overstretching ourselves. We certainly don't have any evidence that capacity in the sector or spending on staff and capacity in the sector is going up. So it could be overstretch. It could be a reluctance to make difficult decisions. It could be that when things are getting difficult, we tend to go back to the way that we've always done it. But certainly one of the things that stands out for us is that if we are going to increase focus on particular areas, we do need to think about our capacity and potentially make sure that the choices we're making are clear, so that when we're going back and doing evaluations and learning, and we've done evaluations with some of you, we can see what that choice is and we can get really good learning, understanding the path that we took and that we chose, so that next time we can bring that learning in to keep on improving our practice. So this one is about targets, so where the campaign is focused. So where we're seeing an increased focus is UK central government. Now, on the one hand, that's great. That sort of, we believe that's worth talking to government. Sometimes that can be hugely frustrating, but essentially it is an indicator that our democracy is still valid if we think that is still the campaign's route that we're choosing. Also, we're choosing to keep focusing on public attitudes and behaviours and the public. So we've got another one of sort of quite a lot of more focus there, 65 of you. So again, that could be a really good indicator that this is a group that we think it's worth spending our time on. So that in itself is quite positive. Some of the areas that we're finding harder or we're pulling back out of potentially are business practice. And that was a bit of a theme through the data in terms of engaging with corporates and businesses. There seemed to be overall, not a massive, but a small pullback from engagement in campaigns in that space. The last thing just to say about this is there is also a whole big sort of middle section that are keeping on with the tactics and the targets that they've had before, which could absolutely be the right decision. But some of the things you'll read in some of the more detail around the threats and what's shifting, things like the shift of the Overton window, we would challenge you in that to say, okay, is it right to stay with the same tactics again? Is there a choice there that you need to adapt or just tweak or test and learn from while the context continues to fluctuate? One of the things we found in the 10-year trends is that while there are threats in each year, the nature of those threats shifts every year. So there is also an additional uncertainty of what the problem will be. So is it the regulators? Is it internal capacity? Is it the political environment? And in each year, it's all of them, but to a different degree. So there is good evidence of a changing context. Are we changing our targets and our tactics to fit that? Is a legitimate question. I don't know the answer. Certainly not for your context. So that's targets. And then we also looked at approaches. So same colour scheme again. So we've got a whole list of different approaches here, from social media to boycott to the arts, all the way back down again to influencing central or local government. So the big swingers here, again, we've got a big kind of sludgy yellow bit in the middle where people are keeping the same focus. We've also got a mismatch between more focus and less focus. But some key areas of more focus, social media was really interesting. So although there's some uncertainty, it's harder to get your voice heard, it's still seen quite comprehensively as an area where we need to invest and we need to get better at. And quite a bit of the innovation, I think, has been around that sort of space. Community mobilisation is another area of more focus. I wonder, yes, they will be shared, Yasin, definitely. And they're also all in the report. We're making the data as available as we can. Community mobilisation, and that connects for us with that story of making sure we're connected with the people affected by the issues. We're working with the people affected by the issues and that lived experience voice, speaking with, not for, all of those trends is also part of this story in focusing a little bit more on that community mobilisation. And you've got that on the third line up, which is advocating on behalf of people with the end of that sentence is first-hand experience of the issue. So that's one of the biggest, in fact, I think it is the biggest growth on that graph. And again, that consistency around central and local government policy. Now, there is a little box as well in the report about devolution. That was something we asked about. The big trend there is that most people don't know. um, which is just the way it is. We will be doing something in the autumn, showcasing where people are working in that uncertain environment really well, and also doing a bit of an update on kind of how that's merging with some people within the devolution and running the devolution process. So if that's particular interest to you, keep an eye out on our training. We'll be doing a bit more as we get a bit further in. And the last thing I'm going to say, and then we can pause and have some questions, is around the less focused bit. So I don't think you'll be massively surprised by these. The main ones are stunts and media campaigns, so those more high risk approaches potentially. Protest and direct action is another one. Again, that probably won't surprise you, given the stories of 2025, particularly around Palestine Action. And then the last one that's probably worth pointing out is that influencing private sector companies is also quite high. And that's that small, not massive, but small trend. And you see that in boycott and divestment as well, a little bit further up the table. And now it's over to you. What we'd really love to hear a bit about is what's resonating with you, what you're curious about, any sort of comments or reflections about how you might use the data that we've shared. Yeah, we'd love to leave a bit of space now to hear from you guys. Okay, so Glenn's just popped in the chat. For those in the Campaigning Leadership Forum, I'll use this survey's finding on better collab, working with us for success and addressing the barriers to effective collaboration as the start point in my presentation on campaigning in coalitions on the 9th of June. See you there. Brilliant. Thank you. And there's quite a lot on collaboration in there. The report's called Hope in Collaboration. That's definitely something we're really interested in as well. So yeah, love to see that. I think Alex from our team will probably be there on the 9th.
Wayne, hi Katie. Thanks for the
Hi.
presentation. I really appreciate it. I wasn't able to get to ECF, so I'm really glad to hear some of this coming through here. So my question is regarding the last slide that you showed, where we had those different bars where we see what we're doing more of, what we're doing less of. Is it possible to draw a line between those people doing more of working with people with lived experience or working at kind of with people at grassroots level and also influencing local decision makers? Do you think that's a reasonable conclusion to make? And or is that like inferring causality where there is none? And if that is true, um, is there something we can take forward from that to say how we then scale that when we want to work on like, issues where decisions are a matter of national policy over?
Okay, so is the community mobilisation, working with people with lived experience, more on those who are trying to influence in local government or local spaces, was your question? And then if yes, how do we learn from that and scale it with national government? Is that okay? So one thing just to say is that some of the data, so we went through all the data and saw where we might be able to segment it so we could distill and boil down to some of those questions and where we couldn't. So I know that's an area that we can't directly do that. But having looked at the information about the successful wins, um, it is definitely not just limited to the local space. So that use of lived experience and that partnership in that area is very much true of campaigns at a national level as well. And I think in terms of that's not quite the same as the community mobilisation part. The community mobilisation where I've seen done well in the winning space has not necessarily been around geographical communities, but communities of interest. Yes, absolutely. One of the things that we're really hoping we can do this year, as far as when we have the awards, which will be the 11th of June, we want to publish some of those case studies with a bit more detail so that we can share that learning. It's not something we've been able to do for a while, but we'd love to like help you get under the skin of those a little bit more and see, yeah, tactically what's working. Would that be of use? I can see thumbs. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great, thanks.
that would be amazing because my role is a movement builder and it's
Mm.
just very I don't come across many other movement builders, I have to be honest, when I'm working in coalitions. So yeah, I would love to meet others and see
Mm.
how we're translating lived experience and yeah, local wins into international wins. Thank you.
Great. And can I suggest if we've got any movement builders on the call that you introduce yourself in the chat and make that connection? Thank you. Who is next, Dwayne? Got a couple of hands now.
Could I maybe jump in, Katie, if that's all right?
Yeah.
It's like I just want to say, Katie, great presentation, really energizing. Thank you. Really good to hear so clearly presented. I was quite taken how there's almost kind of two different stories there. People who are quite positive and not so positive. And a lot of my recent work has been in the refugee and migrant sector, and in particular working on immigration detention. And I've never found it more difficult to access politicians, to have meaningful conversations. We see immigration detention increasing, incredibly bleak and very challenging, but really heartening that some colleagues are having positive experiences. And I wonder, Katie, whether there's more scope in terms of sector-wide solidarity that we can kind of feed off each other, and those who are having wins can make. I don't know. There's something because for some people in the wider charity sector, it is incredibly difficult, and we're being attacked not just on policy but in terms of principle, and that's a really uncomfortable place to be. And I wonder if there's a role for SMK and others in terms of this enhancing solidarity and mutual strength. And what is for some people a really challenging time.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I hear it a lot, Jonathan. So I just first of all thank you for keeping on and just yeah, really empathize with your position. I think one of the things that we're seeing as well, not just in these results, but in the interactions that we have across the board, um, is that I think there was a really this won't be news to you. There's a really high expectation that engagement would go up with local with national government, and that there would be more sympathy to certainly social justice issues, and that hasn't been the case for everyone, as you've articulated. But also the kind of the funnel in to have those engaging conversations seem to have got smaller. So whether we're talking about advocating for government spending or even time to engage and have a conversation, it seems even harder to get through those gates than maybe it did before. So that is something that we're hearing across the board. But yeah, I think there is still something, isn't there? And those people that have got access, that are on the right agenda, what are the issues of solidarity? What are the issues whereby it's not a case of kind of a Trojan horse and kind of going and having this conversation, then let's talk about immigration. But where are the spaces, at least where immigration and asylum seeker organisations can start to build those relationships and get a foot in the door? I think you're right. I don't have an easy answer, but thank you for highlighting that. Luke.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, it's really encouraging to see how people feel like kind of working in coalition is proving to be really effective, and how people are kind of finding solace in that as well as campaigners. I just wondered if any of the respondents talked about any kind of potential barriers to being able to work in that way. I'm just interested in, people have talked about in the survey about kind of lack of resource and funding and leadership concerns around that. I just wondered if any of that maybe might be causing organizations to kind of almost retreat from that kind of more collaborative activity.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't have the page number on me, but there's a whole, so we asked people if they wanted to collaborate more, and I think 92% said yes. But we also asked what's getting in the way. And yes, time and capacity is an obvious one. But there are all sorts of other points as well. So, and we've started a bit of so we've got a new strategy, one of which is around collaboration and coalition. But the way that we're looking at it is, and we did this a little bit at the Campaigning Forum a couple of weeks ago, from kind of impactful conversations at one end to epic coalitions at the other. my hand's on the screen, and everything in between, because I think sometimes we're in a job, we're asked to join a coalition, no one ever stops to say to us, oh, have you done it before? Have you got the skills? Do you know what, can we shadow you? Or can we give you someone to shadow or mentor you through this? So sometimes there's an expectation that we can just do it innately, without necessarily investing in our skills, or maybe even giving us the time to be involved in those spaces is one thing that are coming up. There's something also about, like, what about the in-between things? Like when we don't have to all have loads of paperwork and our comms and our brand needs to be all neatly aligned and the logos are all in the right place. Like, could it be something a bit further down the chain that's a bit more light touch for a moment and then we disperse again? Is there the right support? So some of the best coalitions, and we had some great coalition wins last year, had a bit of admin support. We're working with a couple of tech firms this year to look at, are there any digital solutions or AI-based solutions that could take some of the grunt work out of that, whether it's the FAQs or whether it's the induction of new partners in. So there are lots of kind of little intervention points. There's a bit in the report, but also it's something that we are doing loads of work on this year in terms of, and we're hoping as well to do a bit of a, anyone who's ever been involved in a painful coalition before, like, let's get together and work out how we can unpick some of that. So obviously it's not just us doing that, but those are the sort of things that have come out and that we're trying to do something about. That help. Dwayne, are there some questions in the chat that I'm...
So I saw one that I think was it Laura had one. Are you planning to share any trends from the 10-year surveys? I'm wondering if it'd be useful for some of the backbench Labour MPs who are championing us.
Yeah. So on the 10-year ones, so one of my jobs last autumn was to look at everything we've asked over 10 years and see where we could get that trend data. The ones that we can get 10-year trends on, we've included largely in the report. So it's around how threats have changed. It's around whether the context has got worse overall. It's around the legitimacy of campaigning. There are some shorter trend lines in there. So maybe we asked 5 years out of the 10. There's more that we could push out. But basically we didn't have the resources to do any more than what we've done this time. But now but the data is there. So we're hoping, and if there, I guess the request from you guys to ask for a little bit more, or this would be really useful, is amazing fuel to us to go to another sponsor and say, so this year, we used to have a policy and research team, we don't anymore. So this year we got Bates Wells sponsored us to be able to enable us to do this report. We'll be looking for a sponsor to run it again next year. But yeah, that demand is so helpful in terms of saying, because we're primed and ready to use that. And it's the same with the segmentation. We could do more of that. I didn't quite get the backbencher question. Was
I
it
suppose,
just it? Sorry.
yeah, I suppose what came to mind is that there are some backbench MPs who are champions of the sector as a whole, and so if they can see how things have changed over a period of time, and actually how things are worse under a Labour government, that's shameful. I think, and actually, Jane has put something in about working with the trade union movement in the chat as well. I guess it's about how can we join some of those things together so that we can, push back on things like the covenant, which is it's positive, but actually it's only positive if it works for civil society. And at the moment, what we're seeing is that it's maybe not working for civil society in some of the areas. And so I suppose it's just about how we can pull that narrative together, really.
Yeah, brilliant. Oh, thanks for expanding, Laura, because there's a couple more things I can add that are hopeful, hopefully. So last Thursday, I was with 18 leaders from the TUC, sharing this data with them, doing some other things as well, but sharing this data with them. So that's starting to be disseminated out there. And also it's already been used for, some of you may have participated in the public inquiry around police powers and protest. So the data that we've got around safety and the changing threats to campaigners, we provided that to the Civil Society Voices network in order to facilitate their response. So that's our, that's what we want. We want to be able to bring campaigners' voices together, process them, right word, but then make sure that that's out there and as an accessible way as possible for exactly those reasons, to do that accountability piece. But to also, even as I say, if you go in front of your board or internally in your organization, to do it with confidence. So it's not just me. I'm not just being a bit grumbly. It's actually quite nasty out there. And look, here's some data. And that's also why we put the numbers in there, so you can play with them, but use them in a way that works for your context and your organization. But yeah, they're all publicly available, and yeah, I think that's the end of that sentence.
Okay, it looked like Autumn, you also had a previous question, which I don't think we got to yet. So I'd be interested to see if there was enough data to draw any conclusions about which subsectors were finding it more challenging and which were more positive.
So the quick answer is no, in terms of, so if we think about that donut, so we were also quite careful with our methodology this time, because obviously if we're going to push that data out there and say use it, we want to be really confident, or at least really transparent. This is the methodology we use. This is how many people. This is who it represents. So if you think back to that donut of those little sectors, I think the biggest group was maybe 15 to 20. So there weren't, and I think our cutoff, Greta's actually on the call. Greta, maybe you can remind me what our statistical cutoff was based on our data, but we did have a bar. So what we could do though is we could draw a few different focus areas together potentially. And Greta, my colleague on the call, did a lot of work on kind of working out how we could cut it. I think we already have quite a lot of anecdotal and some really good case study data about, as Jonathan shared, about where it's tough. I think for me, the power of this report is that it's tough everywhere. It's great that people are winning, but 100%. Well, I think one person didn't know, but everyone else thought there was a need for more campaigning. So regardless of kind of whether you're winning or not, there's still a gap between the change we need to see and the successes that we're having. But yeah, if you've got a really specific one, follow up and we'll do that. Sorry, Autumn, I interrupted you.
No, I was interrupting you there. No, I think it was just partly, a kind of a personal thing of obviously working in the environmental and climate sectors. You do kind of get dragged into climate anxiety, but it was also whether, if there was one particular sector doing or feeling positive, why? I want to know who's doing well and what can we learn from them. But obviously, with 166 respondents, you're not going to better drill down.
So we can't do it by sector, but there's definitely the answer to the why generically, like what is helping people. And hopefully, yes, as I said, if we can do that case study bit of work around the wards, we'll also have some really good deep dives on exactly what's working for people. And one of our award categories is around environment, so there would definitely be something with that sector. Thanks, Autumn.
And there was a question, sort of, is there an award category for the devolved nations?
No, there isn't, but I can I? There's definitely some representation in the shortlist. The shortlist is being revealed in the Million Acts of Hope week in the middle of May. So it's part of that celebration. And then the actual winners, you find out at the awards. Thanks, Laura. Alex, welcome. Hello.
Hi, I'm loving this. Thank you. I'm loving the hope. Let's face it, there's not enough of it around. So I'm loving the framing. I'm just, when you to say, I think you said a third of them were people that worked for charities, and actually the challenge with charities as well, increasingly worry about their income and other big things, and actually kind of stepping back from campaigning. I'm just thinking about the ecosystem 10, 20 years ago, where we all kind of had quite big campaigns, advocacy departments, and invested in it, and everyone would do ECF training, and actually how those budgets have dwindled. And I kind of just interested in how we kind of capture those who were not in the charity world. So whether actually to a certain extent, maybe there's more hope in those who don't work for charity, because you also see incredible campaigners that don't necessarily know about the survey and yeah, some of this. And yeah, maybe it's a bigger question, but actually how do we, where that infrastructure, maybe those coalitions were easier to get to when you had a more structured, actually there were in charities that talk to each other. Is there more, especially kind of seeing youth campaigners come up, ecosystem, and maybe that might even tip the results, I don't know, one way or the others. Maybe maybe that belief in changes. It's one to.
Yeah. Yeah, really interesting thought. And so this year we changed the title of the survey. So we changed it to Campaigners and Changemakers Survey. We were trying to get more buy-in from people who weren't in charities. So it was 74% in paid roles, 79% in registered charities. Obviously, I guess, and I know you know this well, there's a massive spectrum there. So 80% of those charities registered with the Charity Commission are actually under 10K and tiny. And then there's obviously some behemoths and everybody in between. So I guess we've got to be a little bit careful when we're talking about charities in general. But when I think about the the coalitions that particularly thinking about the awards and the nominations, they usually have been quite a diverse ecosystem. The challenge has then been how do we manage the power dynamic in that? And so that's another kind of important bit in that kind of impactful conversations to epic coalitions. If you have an impactful conversation with someone with lived experience, how do you honour that? If they're in the room when you've got a massive coalition and you're all using jargon about this acronym and this acronym, how do you make that a welcome space? So I think that is absolutely part of the success, but we're still on this journey about how we make the ecosystem really sing, and that kind of synergy that we see brilliantly in nature in terms of that mutuality between different parts of an ecosystem. That's something we're still wrestling with a bit. And I think we just need to be a little bit careful I think we haven't all necessarily in the sector made that mental shift in terms of just how fragile some of the charities are. I think you're right. There was a brilliant day where it would be assumed, we could provide a room or a space or someone to write up the minutes, but actually a lot of people are in really what feels like really fragile jobs at the moment. And how do we, from that place of apparent scarcity, still have the hospitality, the generosity to invite, as you say, young campaigners in the room or grassroots campaigners, people that can bring some of the things that we need, or maybe it's going out as well. So there's something creative and wonderful and diverse that can happen, but it's quite a fragile context to do it in. We need that confidence, don't we, as well? Jane, I don't know if you want to add anything, or Alex, you want to come back on that?
I just love that analogy. That how do you make the ecosystem sing, and your analogy with nature as well. You need all the different players. You don't just need a couple of big oak trees. You need to have all the little, and actually the harmony. And the singing. Yeah, I'm definitely going to quote you on that one.
You're welcome. All right, 20 Greta. So Greta's just said in the chat, 25 was our cut-off sample size in terms of segmentation. Thanks, Greta. Yeah, so two things I just wanted to leave you with. So the first is our response as SMK. So if you read the report from beginning to end, it'll end with a challenge in terms of what your response looks like, and a little bit of information about how SMK have used the data to respond. And so as we go into the next couple of years, these are going to be our focus areas. So that underpinning of collaboration and coalition building, the whole spectrum, the how can we find those little leverage points where we can enable you guys to do that even better? What is our role in that ecosystem, and how can we make it sing? So that's going to be a key focus for SMK. Then the second one is around innovation and adaptation. So understanding that people are focusing in new areas, the context is shifting, but maybe also people are staying where they are. There was definitely something in the data about tactics being out of date. We know we had a brilliant response to our AI and campaigning training and our campaigning and political turmoil training. So again, from our position, kind of being, one removed from any particular issue, how can we kind of give you the skills? How can we prompt the thinking? How can we give you the space to develop your ability to innovate and adapt, and also share that best practice where it's going well? And then the last bit for us is around bridging and belonging, and it links so closely to the others, but it's about unexpected allies. To Jonathan's point about learning from each other, about seeing where it's working, but also we believe that one of the biggest problems about the rise of the far right in the campaigning space is it's making that space less safe and less diverse. And so we need to help people feel safe. We need to prove to each other that we belong and that our voice is important, but also create those bridges across where people may have slightly different views for us. So we are not part of that fragmentation of society that we're seeing, but we're actually building that social capital and that infrastructure that we need to make social transformation happen. So that's what we're working on. Help us, join in. And then the awards, save the date. So on the 11th of June, we'll be live streaming our annual campaigner awards. If you want some inspiration, if you want to see some great campaigning, I don't know if there are any winners in the room here today. There may be. This is just a lovely moment, lovely hour and a half, just to kind of go, yeah, I'm part of this, and it's great, and it is making a difference, and change is possible. So we'll make sure through ECF or SMK newsletters that you know about that. And a big thank you to Twain as well for your hosting.
You're very welcome. And also I can say that I had the honor of being invited to be a judge for the awards, and the quality of candidates was amazing. There's certainly some campaigns there you may never have heard of that actually are incredible. So I would definitely encourage sort of showing up for those sort of that award event as well, just to be inspired, to get that hope that actually I think all of us need a little bit of a boost of every now and again in today's world.
Great. Thank you. Link to slides, link to reports, all coming your way. Thanks, everyone. Keep on keeping on. Doing a great job.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.